Now I think there's a strangeness that lingers with Jesus' death on a cross. There's a slight, I suppose, frustration with us now, as there probably was then. People thinking, why, Son of God, did you die on a cross? And let humans do it. Let us humans do that. That's looking back on it now, but at the same time, there would have been people then thinking the same. Why didn't he save himself? Now, has anyone watched Downton Abbey? Is anyone a fan? I'm a huge Downton Abbey fan. So if I was to say Mr. Bates, do you know Mr. Bates? I always found myself, Mr. Bates' character, when I watched him, always found myself almost clawing at the sofa in frustration at his he just let himself get into these situations where he could be easily accused, easily prosecuted for things that really weren't of his doing, even if this was stealing something, if this was murder, whatever it may be, is always, even when he knew who'd done it, he wouldn't say who it was, just to keep the air calm and clear. And he sort of thought, he's being arrested now. He's got himself into this mess, sort of thing. And it's that frustration when you look at Jesus, who he died on a cross, but it's far more deeper than that, and it's so much more meaning. So yes, tonight is about truth. My talk tonight is about truth. And I just want to start by talking about a little illustration that I have about lies and about truth. In 2012, I went on my first Young Life camp as a camper, and we had, in the evening, what we call cabin time. So it's a time where you reflect on your day, you talk about the highlights, the lowlights, what the speaker was talking about when he spoke from the Bible that day, what our favourite food was. And Rich, who was a Young Life leader at the time, we went around the circle and we were talking about lying and lies, and the question was, have you ever lied? Now obviously the answer to that from everyone is going to be yes, yes, or have you ever lied? Yes, at some point. Or why have you lied? Why did you lie? Sort of thing. Was it to protect someone, etc.? And I was probably about 4 people round in the circle, and we went round as have you ever lied? So yes, I did at this time because this is my friend at school. Went round. It got round to me, and Rich said to me, so Eddie, have you ever lied? And my answer was exactly, well, I'm a magician. And obviously what I meant with that is, as a magician, what I was implying is that I don't always, I suppose, tell the truth of what's going on. And it's an interesting thing, performing magic as a Christian, something I always have to consider and always think about, especially with secrecy, hiding the truth, and lies. And it's something I've looked into, like, what's the difference between a lie and a secret? And a secret, I've looked at definitions, and definitions of a secret include holding a piece of information back, usually a piece of information that someone else ought to really know, or just it's hiding the truth. And I was sort of thinking, well, as a magician, the trick, the secret, isn't really what people ought to know. So it's quite difficult trying to relate to that. And then the definition of a lie is deceiving someone, taking something and giving them a false impression, deceiving them, telling them a false piece of information to cover up the truth. Now, what troubles me is that I can relate to that more in magic than a secret, because what you're doing in magic is you're getting something or a prop or something, and you're deceiving people. You're creating the illusion of a reality that isn't really real. Now, I suppose when people come to my shows, they don't expect me to tell them how everything's done. That defeats the object. So I suppose really when they come to a magic show, they are expecting to be entertained. Now that's the reason why you create this illusion. I suppose the intention isn't to deceive where a lie is. But magic's intention is to entertain. Now, I'm not just trying to justify magic here, justify how I do magic and why I do magic, but linking in with tonight's talk on truth. Recently, the past couple of months, I've been on this journey of truth, finding out so much about truth, its power fundamentally, and how just being open and being transparent just helps almost every aspect of life. It's taken a long time sort of to get to that, but just there's certain stages have cropped up in the past couple of weeks, and even just a couple of weeks ago I've learned that just talking to people about things that are inside you and problems you've got, rather than holding them in, can just change everything. It's almost like a cage that you break open, and what seems big to you may seem very small to someone else, and they can help you deal with things. Now, Jesus only ever told the truth. Jesus only ever did good. Yet, he was hated by humans, by some humans. Evil human life, and he wasn't compatible with that way of thinking. It was a complete contrast. So, talking about tonight's passage, which is in John 18:28, we hear about the hatred towards Jesus, so much so that they were condemning him to death, even though he had done nothing at all wrong. Then, the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanliness, they did not enter the palace, because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" "If he were not a criminal," they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourself, judge him by your own law." "But we have no right to execute anyone." They objected. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked. "Or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it that you have done?" A genuine question. Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king then?" Pilate said. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. The truth. Everyone on the side of the truth listens to me." What is truth? Sarcastically, cynically speaking, retorted Pilate. With this, he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him. But it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at a time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews?" They shouted back, "No, not him. Give us Barabbas." Now Barabbas had taken part in an uprising. Now, why did the Jews want Jesus dead? Why did the religious leaders want Jesus gone, ridded of? Some of the reasons include just the claims Jesus made, these outrageous, godly claims and powerful influence he started to build up. And the crowds he used to draw in were far greater than these religious leaders could. He had far more the authority that he almost started building. His deeds, the goodness he was doing, again, similar before, his great big crowds, these miracles that he was doing, they couldn't match that. No one could. Jesus and God only could. He was a threat to their religious systems, to their systems of religion. He didn't really comply with that because he was legit. He was the real thing. He was there preaching, talking from the authority itself that created in the first place, rather than this tradition, this system that's developed over time and almost in their favour, I suppose. Jesus was that. It was just a threat to their way of life. He was an outrage, and he hung around with people that were ultimately, I suppose, a disgrace to people of power, people high up, tax collectors or people, alcoholics, or just general sinners and people so low in society that it was an outrage. So these are some of the reasons why Jesus was so hated, I suppose. When you hear that, all he ever did was good. All he ever did was truthful, nothing hidden, nothing disguised. Now, something jumped out at me during this passage when I was reading it. It says that the religious rulers and the Jews, they stayed outside during this, when they delivered him to Pilate, to maintain a spiritual purity. Yet the reason they were there was to see the Son of God to his death. Such a contrast there. It's incredible to look at. To maintain a spiritual purity. Paul wrote about this in Galatians later on, about this law that had been created, in just a passage from there, from Galatians 5:4. You who are trying to be justified by the law have been alienated from Christ. You have fallen away from grace. Here you get such a sense of, such a platform for sort of irresponsibility. Everyone's there, everyone's rushing around. Pilate's asking him questions. Basically the responsibility for Jesus is being passed on to others. You've got the religious leaders passing on to the Jewish leaders, you've got Jewish leaders passing on to Pilate, you've got even written that Herod was trying to pass it on to Pilate at some points. And then Pilate's just trying to wash his hands of it as well. Now, why is this? Because there's no real basis for what they're trying to do. There's no real basis for their prosecution. So whatever any of them do is going to be unclean. It's going to be sinful, even if they don't think it is. Now, Jesus was crucified because of these lies and deceit, and ultimately an evil in the human condition. All he did was speak the truth and was good. Matthew 13:13, it said that Jesus spoke in parables because it was clearer for people to hear. He spoke to them because to draw people's attention, to relate, to communicate with people of all backgrounds. He would create these wonderful images, these wonderful examples in parables, so that they could hear the truth truthfully and fully, so that they could hear it without having to, I suppose, translate too much. Now, in Matthew 13:13, this is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. So Jesus just wants to give the good news. He just wants to be truthful and tell others what God has told him. And I suppose, how can we apply this to our life? How can we be truthful in faith, in our faith? I know systems, society sometimes get on top of our faith sometimes, in situations where we could probably do more than we do. But we're not perfect. We are fundamentally broken. This is something, going back to what I was saying about truth, finding out about myself and breaking through these cages, is that we are fundamentally broken. But using that word again, really, who cares? Because that's what we are. And Jesus has come to save us from that and fix us and give us the best life he can, redeemed us by dying on the cross to live the best life possible. I think it's so important that we do put our faith in Jesus first, as difficult as it sometimes can be. It's what we're for, it's what we're here for. That's why we're standing in this room, because we want to live in Christ, and doing that is setting an example, being truthful, being open, being vulnerable. And through that, it's such an inspiration to others around us. Sometimes people will prosecute us. Sometimes they will think we have bad intentions because we're so good. It's funny to think that, because we'll be, can I help you with that? Can I do that? Can I take your bags? Or can I do this? Obviously not over the top, but it's like, what does this guy want? What does this guy want? He's obviously doing this for something. But really, as a Christian, living to Jesus' example, we're just doing it through love. Nothing more. So much strength and inspiration in that. And there is, in the Jews who prosecuted and didn't want Jesus there, there is a strange sort of innocence between that. Say there's 100 of them there, all wanting Jesus dead. How many of those people in that crowd probably weren't totally for that, but just going along with it because they're in a crowd, and if they stood up against the other 60 or so, they would be flogged and beaten up and stuff. There is an innocence in that, I think, because as humans, we're not perfect, but we can live as perfect a life as possible. So I ask you to go out and just see things in truth, to tell the truth. I'm not saying we're all liars or anything like that, but just, I suppose, even an example was it's just a petty example, I suppose. If we go out and say, what a horrible day it is. Is the day horrible? Or do we just think the weather's bad, I suppose? This is just a really small example, but I suppose the language we use around other people, it could be interpreted in all sorts of ways. They're just miserable, they just don't like the day. Or rather, it's a beautiful, amazing day that we can, full of opportunity, just with some things we don't like in it. But just applying that to life in general. Just thinking of how we can inspire and influence others through what we do. There's a wonderful quote from Batman Dark Knight Rises from Alfred Pennyworth, Michael Caine, who plays him. Maybe it's time we all stop trying to outsmart the truth and let it have its day. Works quite well. Just as how Jesus could have saved himself, but he didn't, so that we can live the best life we possibly can.